Howdy, friends. My name's Milo Rossi, and welcome back to another episode of Awful Archaeology, the series where I spin the wheel of pain, which is completely covered in archaeological conspiracy theories and misconceptions, and I talk about whatever it lands on in depth. In the last episode of Awful Archaeology, we talked about the Gosford Glyphs, a set of supposed Egyptian hieroglyphics located in Australia. We watched a little bit of Ancient Aliens, my custom drink exploded on me, we had a grand old time. Now at the end of that episode, the Wheel of Pain decreed that today I would have to talk about something very unusual. The discovery of a supposed set of remains belonging to an extinct human ancestor native to North America. Now if that sounds insane to you, I promise this is just the tip of the iceberg. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Awful Archaeology, where today we are going to be taking a deep dive into the monstrosity that is the It is still winter in the studio. For those of you who didn't catch my episode on the Rupkin Lake, we have installed a new piece of technology here in the barn. We got a thermometer so that you guys can actually quantify how much I'm freezing to death. Today, it is a balmy 38 degrees in here, and the sun's going down, so I'm sure it'll only be getting colder. I've got your love to keep me warm. This story begins with a man by the name of Harold Cook. Harold Cook was the son of none other than Captain James Cook. Not that one, not like the actual Captain James Cook, a completely different one that you've never heard of. This James Cook was a cattle rancher and a paleontologist. He was a landholding man with a big swath of land out in the American West, which he called the Agate Springs Ranch. Now, as luck would have it for a paleontologist such as Captain Cook, this land was incredibly rich in fossils. So rich, in fact, the United States would go on to purchase it in the 1960s to create the Agate Fossil Beds National Monument. The apple does not fall far from the tree, and so little Harold grew up just like his father, being a rancher and a paleontologist. The year is 1917, and 30-year-old Harold makes a discovery. He finds the remains of what he believes to be a great ape in the fossil beds of Nebraska. And so he consulted Henry Fairfield Osborn, a famous American paleontologist and geologist. And together they were able to confirm that what he had found was the remains of a great ape. And so this newly discovered species was named Hesperopithecus haroldcooki. Hesperopithecus meaning ape of the Western world, and haroldcooki being Latin for ego trip. This would be the first great ape species discovered in North America, and was a discovery that was poised to shake the budding field of human evolution to its core. So was this the remains of a great ape endemic to North America? Perhaps true uncontestable fossil evidence of a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch? Or was this a highly misleading intro that leaves out crucial information so you stick around to watch the rest of the video? Well, lucky for you, you're about to find out. So to get this thing started per Awful Archaeology tradition, it's drinking time. Did I put an apostrophe there? I totally put an apostrophe there. I don't want to see a single goddamn comment about this. I'll block you. I'll delete you. For those of you that are new to Awful Archaeology, each episode features a custom drink. Something that's inspired by whatever we're talking about today to just try and actually get me through the pain of having to talk about it. Now today's a very special day because for the first time in almost 2 years, we have a custom drink made by none other than the incredibly talented Newport Foodie. I should probably move my laptop here because I know I'm gonna make a mess. That would be an appropriate way for my laptop to go out though. Drowned in alcohol. That's how I want to go out. He died as he lived, soaking wet and piss drunk. Now also, for those of you that don't know, all my videos have live premieres. And if you want to join me for the live premiere to drink along with me, I post the recipes for all of the drinks for Awful Archaeology a little bit beforehand. And thank God I do, because oh my God, I have to make corn simple syrup. What have I gotten myself into? Remove 2 tablespoons of corn from a can, reserve for cocktail, drain the corn, add the saucepan with the sugar and the... Am I making a drink or am I doing fucking alchemy here? You will add 2 bricks of lead to align your humors. I guess first and foremost, let's go make some corn simple syrup. First thing we need is some corn. Hi, post-editing Milo here. You could do like a full, 10-minute uncut version of me making this drink. It's pretty fucking funny, but it's just way too long for a video that's about something else, so I think I'm gonna do a full, raw version of it on my second channel. So if you wanna see me make a mess in full, unadulterated 4K, go check that out. Second channel is also a good place if you wanna just see more of me as a person. Right now I'm uploading the vlog of me doing my cross-country solo motorcycle trip, so if you wanna see me live off the back of my bike camping every night, you can see my day-to-day trials and tribulations. Shameless second channel plug, link will be down there if you want to catch the rest of this drink thing. Tell us the answer, Louis. Where's the stash house? Corn into the cocktail shaker. I think this is an ounce. We'll say it's an ounce. No, that's not the right part. Emergency, put it in there. I'm glad I have paper towels in here. 2.5 ounce vodka. Okay, now you're speaking my language. 1, 2.5. 2 episodes in a row of me spilling shit everywhere. Supposed to be in a coupe glass, but I'm doing it in a martini glass because I don't have one of those. That's actually beautiful. Oh my God. Moment of truth. I'd like to give a big thank you to Newport Foodie for designing the drink for this video. Go check him out. He makes a really beautiful video making this drink that's a lot more elegant than mine, and he deserves more credit for it. Now, bottoms up. Stop me now. Damn! I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that much corn going into an alcoholic drink, I had my doubts, but that is fucking delicious. It's like a enhanced whiskey sour. That's so good. All right, guys, I have a challenge for you. I want you to look at the drink from this video and the process that it took to make it compared to the drink from last video. I want you to guess which drink was made by a professional mixologist and which one was made by a frat basement mixologist. You're just lucky I didn't put it in a red Solo cup. Well, now that I can think a little bit more clearly, why don't we take a deeper look at Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie. Now I told you that Harold Cook found the remains of this creature, but I have to admit, that was a little bit misleading, because Harold Cook didn't find the remains of this creature. Instead, he found the... It takes a lot to confirm the presence of a new species in the eyes of the scientific community, especially a human species. It requires countless instances being discovered, years of research, peer review, and pretty much a unanimous agreement from the scientific community. A great modern example of this would be the Denisovans. We have many fossilized fragments of them, but despite that, at the time of making this video, they have not been assigned a genus and species of their own by the academic community. Well, of course they haven't, Milo. That's because academia is reluctant to challenge the paradigm. No, they're really not, I promise. It's called doing your due diligence. As it stands right now, we don't have a holotype specimen for Denisovans. This is a skull or a very complete skeleton that is sort of the benchmark for what the species looked like and sort of is constructed like. In my Lost Lineage series, where we look at the human evolutionary tree, we have seen other ancestors which are much older and have very good holotype specimens. One that immediately comes to mind is the, 6 million year old Sahelanthropus chadensis skull. So as it stands right now, even though we know Denisovans existed, we would be jumping the gun to assign them their own species. Because as it stands right now, we don't know if they are their own species, a subspecies, or if the Denisovans that we've been seeing are actually multiple different species. Science works in part by correcting its mistakes, but it works mostly in checking itself, in triple, double, quadruple checking to make sure that as few mistakes as possible are made in the first place. So then what exactly was found of Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie? To confirm a brand new species of great ape, especially in a part of the world where there are no other known great ape species, you would need to find a pretty convincing piece of evidence. But this was 1917. I'm sure that it was a little bit different back then. The world was a little bit too focused on seeing how many 17-year-olds they could kill with mustard gas. World War I mention, woo! So maybe at the time, the evidence could have been a little bit more lax. But you have no idea where I'm going with this. The sole specimen of Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie was found by Cook in the Upper Snake River fossil beds in the northwestern part of Nebraska, and the remains consisted of a tooth. That is it. A tooth. Like one of these. You thought that my smash cut was a typo, but no. I truly mean the remain. Now I have no idea whether or not Cook thought he had found a human ancestor when he actually found the tooth, because it wouldn't be until 1922 that he would actually have the tooth studied. So when Cook decided to get this tooth researched, he did what any sane person would do when he needs help understanding something, and that is to ask a eugenicist, "Where is my Sharpie?" Honestly, that's a pretty catchy title. I could probably pitch that to Fox and they'd sign me for it. At the very beginning of this episode, I mentioned a fellow by the name of Henry Fairfield Osborn. Now, unfortunately, we're gonna have to talk about him a little bit. If you're not comfortable with discussions of any of that stuff, skip ahead to the next chapter, because this is not super pretty. In other news, it is now 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Henry Fairfield Osborn was an American geologist and paleontologist. Granted, he wasn't a very good one, but I'll get into that in a minute. And his love of history propelled him to be the president of the American Museum of Natural History for 25 years. He was also a vehement eugenicist. Like a true American businessman, he channeled his entrepreneurial spirit into his passion for racism, co-founding the American Eugenics Association. Yeah, that was a thing, but they teach you about that in school all the time, don't they? Oh, the squirrels are up there. Oh god, they're gonna hear me talking about eugenics. Teaching my squirrels about eugenics, not clickbait? Osborn was a proponent of the claim that the Earth was divided into races, each of which had a predetermined set of hereditary traits. This concept morphed into Nordicism, the idea that Europe had been populated by a lost, white, Nordic, potentially Atlantean race. Wow, those squirrels are pissed. They really don't like the fact I'm talking about eugenics. Now, if this sounds kind of familiar to you, the idea of Atlantis, it's because many modern Atlantis conspiracy theories can trace their roots to Nordicism. Even if today their sort of preachers are not directly weaving racism into what they're saying, you'll notice that they don't really have any questions about what, technology the people in Europe had to build things, but suddenly when the brown people had technology, then it's a big problem. From Atlantis to Lemuria to Tartaria, all of them are tied to Nordicism and, in the core, racism and eugenics. But Milo, they're not saying that they don't like brown people. Yeah, well, that's because it's not cool to say that anymore, so they're just saying the next best thing, which is that, oh, well, brown people couldn't build the pyramids, but I'm not going to question how Rome did anything. Now, the 1920s was the heyday of scientific racism, and Osborn found himself among the ranks of those who aimed to weaponize the developing scientific community in order to justify their pre-existing racist beliefs. He even wrote prefaces for the infamous eugenics book, The Passing of the Great Race by Madison Grant. Grant was actually a colleague of Osborn, an anthropologist at the American Museum of Natural History and one of the directors of the American Eugenics Society. And he is responsible for such hits as having a Congolese man named Ota Benga displayed alongside chimpanzees at the Bronx Zoo. I'm gonna say that again. A Congolese man displayed alongside chimps in a zoo. Conspiracy theorists are constantly talking about how they're hiding things from us and the American education system doesn't want you to know the truth. And the moment you start talking about how deep-seated racism it is in this country, they get their fucking panties in a twist. I think as Americans, we have a responsibility to talk about the dark past of this country. Because frankly, I love this country. And because I love this country, I want it to do fucking better. Anyone who refuses to criticize their country can't call themselves a patriot. I can't believe the Bronx Zoo thing just fucking shook me. I'm... The Passing of the Great Race, which I just mentioned and Osborn wrote prefaces for, is one of the most influential eugenics texts of all time. It inspired the Immigration Act of 1924, which was passed by United States representatives trying to stop a stream of alien blood, which restricted non-European immigration to the United States and all but banned East Asian immigration to the United States. It also validated a litany of miscegenation laws that spread across the United States in an attempt to ban interracial marriage and relationships outright. And the icing on the cake is that this book was a huge inspiration for exactly who you would expect, with Madison Grant receiving a personal note saying, "This book is my Bible," from none other than Adolf Hitler. Another thing they should probably teach in the United States. Nazi Germany looked to the United States as a role model for their extermination camps, with two of their primary inspirations being our attempted extermination of the indigenous people and slavery. If the government's not going to teach us about, racism and eugenics, and they're going to start banning books that talk about it, I guess it's just up to us to have to do it, isn't it? Anyway, it was into these qualified hands that Cook decided to give his single piece of fossilized evidence in 1922 in order to finally get that bitch. On March 14th, 1922, Osborn received the tooth to his office. In the letter that he wrote back to Cook, he said, "I sat down with the tooth and I said to myself, it looks 100% arthropoid. We need to talk about this tooth for a second." It was pretty much featureless. It had very little detail, its crown was smooth and worn, and the entire thing had been seriously degraded by God knows how many years of water erosion. As a result, the tooth was rounded and smooth and lacked most of the crucial detail that you would need in order to be able to assign it to any species, especially a brand new species. In fact, the tooth actually looked a lot like this. Oh, wrong one. It looked a lot
like this. This is an exact replica of the Nebraska Man tooth, based on drawings, photographs, and casts of the original discovery. You can see from this small silver model that it was heavily worn down, leaving it with an almost completely smoothed appearance, and yet almost an exact match for a human molar. Now, this little beautiful piece of jewelry right here is a completely original design made for this video, in collaboration with none other than SWEETLEAF Jewelry. I've worked with them before. You may remember the Sahelanthropus chedensis skull ring, or the Aurorantugenensis femur bone. They're a small independent English business who make handcrafted sterling silver jewelry, and this is our most recent release. Well, this and one other thing that's over there, I'll show you in a second. And this is going to be our first permanent item. So whenever you watch this video, you can get one of these for yourself. That being said, we do have a limited piece for the Nebraska Man, this beautiful little plate, featuring the Nebraska Man tooth on the front, and a little sketch of the Nebraska Man reconstruction drawing, which I'm going to talk about in just a couple minutes. Now, this is a limited piece. It will only be available for 2 weeks beginning at the premiere of this video. Now, the reason that I like working with SWEETLEAF is because I hate YouTube merch. It's all tacky garbage that I absolutely despise. So my goal is to make merch that's more like art, a piece of jewelry that you're actually going to be proud to wear, created by independent silversmiths rather than sweatshop workers. So if you want a handmade piece of sterling silver pseudo-archaeology and support me and a small business while doing it, well, it's live now. Link in the description. Feels good to be working with SWEETLEAF again. I absolutely love doing these things. They're just so nice. All right, let's get right back into it.
Now, regardless of the deteriorated state of the tooth, Osborne was convinced that what they had found was the remains of a brand new species. Almost immediately, Osborne and Cook took to the media with their discovery, and it wasn't long before word of the discovery reached the English anatomist Grafton Elliot Smith. Elliot Smith? I wonder if there's any relation. But I'm gonna love you anyhow. Boom, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Elliot Smith helped fuel the hype train of Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie. Have I said that right a single time? Hesperopithecus. Elliot Smith helped fuel the flames of Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie by having a reconstruction of it published in a London paper. The paper, entitled The Illustrated London News, contained this image, which you have probably seen many times in this video already, by Amity Forrester. Now, Forrester's drawing depicts two Hesperopitheci, accompanied by some animals whose remains were also found nearby to this discovery. Now, the artist claims that the drawing was based heavily on the Java Man, which he said, quote, "The proportions and attitudes were those of an average Englishman," which honestly saying that the proportions and attitudes of the Java Man was equitable to that of an Englishman is highly insulting to the Java Man. So Osborne was so confident in Cook's discovery that he had God knows how many casts made of the Hesperopithecus tooth, and he sent all of these casts to 26 different institutions for peer review and study. Now, Osborne seemed pretty confident in this claim. Now, I think what he expected to happen was, he'd send off this tooth to everyone, all the researchers would see it, and they'd come up to him and they'd be like, "You're right, it's a new species, and you know what, while I'm at it, you were totally right about the brown people." Now, despite the confidence that Osborne had in sending this to other research institutions, his confidence seems to have been woefully misplaced, because upon receiving the cast, he was met with a nearly unanimous response from the scientific community. That response being, "Dude, what the f***? Oh no, I haven't been doing the string. Every now and then I do the string, but I need you now tonight. And I need you more than ever. And we'll only be making it right, because we'll be holding the string." Almost immediately, Osborne was met with skepticism from the scientific community. I'm not even done with this yet. I guess I didn't spill that much of it. British anthropologist Arthur Smith Woodward received one of the casts, and he almost immediately casted his doubt upon its association with an extinct species of hominid. He is quoted as saying, "The occurrence of a man-like ape among fossils in North America seems so unlikely that good evidence is needed to make it credible." Ironically, Woodward is the anthropologist associated with the Piltdown Man, who is actually another discovery on the Wheel of Pain that I have not talked about yet. Pot calling the kettle black there, Woodward. And I don't know if Osborne's the kind of person who'd like to be called black. W.K. Gregory, a man who would later accompany both Osborne and Cook on a dig to look for further Nebraska Man, is quoted as saying, "The scientific world, however, was far from accepting without further evidence the validity of Professor Osborne's conclusion that the fossil tooth from Nebraska represented either a human or an arthropoid tooth." Now, this response was nearly unanimous from all anthropologists and archaeologists who were given this fossil, with all of them expressing their agreement that the decision to class this as a new human species was hasty, ego-motivated, and lacked sufficient evidence. And this drawing from the Illustrated London News garnered especially harsh criticism. That criticism being one that you actually probably came to as well when you first saw this drawing. That criticism, of course, being, how are you going to draw an entire reconstruction of a human ancestor when all you have to go off is one tooth? It looks more like an ancient reconstruction fossil of a 70s British hair metal band. You can all look at that guy and tell me that he's not gonna absolutely kill it with a drum solo. We got the vocalist and lead guitar sort of walking, carrying it. You know, he's a little bit, he's got the pretty face. And then we got the drummer crouched on the ground looking like he's trying to, I don't know, eat a grub or something. What is he doing? I don't really know what he's doing, but it kind of looks like he's strangling a rabbit. Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie was the first human ancestor who knew how to fucking shred. Okay. That was a weird fucking tangent. What is in this? Now, in his defense, even Osborne expressed criticism of the illustration of the Nebraska Man. Despite it being a species that he was instrumental in helping to create, he said about this drawing, quote, "Such a drawing or reconstruction would doubtless be only a figment of the imagination of no scientific value and undoubtedly inaccurate," end quote. Now, that being said, the Illustrated London News was practically a tabloid publication, so pretty much nobody actually saw this as being a scientific paper. But much like today, it is tabloid publications that will spread misinformation further. While they're not tabloids, I see this in my work all too frequently. Short-form video platforms like TikTok and YouTube will allow people to say pretty much anything and for it to reach a massive amount of people. A tabloid and a TikTok are reaching the same audience. Those are people who have no reason to question it. So despite this being a tabloid publication, it could do actual damage in making people think that this is a real discovery with scientific evidence backing it up. Now, the farthest that Nebraska Man made it into academia was a brief footnote in a 1924 textbook entitled Human Origins. Despite this book being published at the zenith of the Nebraska Man's popularity, the author, George McCurdy, had this to say about it. In 1920, Osborne described 2 molars from the Pliocene of Nebraska. He attributed these to an anthropoid primate, to which he has given the name Hesperopithecus. The teeth are not well preserved, so that the validity of Osborne's determination has not yet been generally accepted. This is one of the largest and only mentions of the Nebraska Man in any sort of scientific publication. And it's relegated to that, a footnote in which the author says, probably not. It was clear that at this moment there would be no resolution on the Nebraska Man. That is, until more evidence was found. And so Osborne and Cook saddled up the wagons and headed back to Snake Creek on a dig that would finally solve this mystery. Mittens are not the tool for this job. I've got my mittens to keep me warm. Speaking of which, I think it said it got warmer in here. How's that even possible? The squirrels are breathing. Squirrels be breathing. I got 100% squirrel power. The upper Snake Creek fossil beds are just a handful of miles south of the agate fossil beds. The sediments present here date to the Miocene period, a span from about 20 to 5 million years ago. This time period was a much warmer part of Earth's history. It took place before the start of the most recent ice age about 2 million years ago. And during this time period, mammals would have dominated the continent. The Miocene would have seen the rise of the world's first great grasslands, and of course all of the species that would come with them. This ancient American grassland would have seen the presence of animals like Stenomylus, a type of gazelle, highly unusual paleocastor, an enormous type of beaver that would dig corkscrewed burrows into the ground, burrows that would later fill with sediment and would allow us to find them fossilized today, as well as the formidable Daedon with its powerful teeth and jaws capable of crushing bone. When the team arrived at this fossil bed in 1925, they found countless bones, almost all of them being mammalian, belonging to the thousands of individuals that had once roamed this ancient American grassland. But there was something that was missing: any further evidence of fossils associated with Hesperopithecus Harold Cookie. Ooh, I'm down to the corn dregs. And so as the dig continued, they found bone after bone of extinct mammal, until one day a member of the team found the bones of an extinct peccary. A peccary is a cousin of the pig. In the last episode of Awful Archaeology, where I said I was going to be doing a video on the Nebraska Man, I had someone comment saying, if you call a peccary a pig, I'm gonna kill you. I don't know if they actually said that, but I'm gonna just say they did, and no one is gonna check me on it, because my word is law. As the team analyzed the remains of this extinct peccary, they noticed something that seemed a little bit too familiar. A worn fourth molar still in place in the animal's jaw. And finally, their fears were confirmed. The sole fossil of Hesperopithecus haroldcooki was not a brand new species. In fact, it wasn't even a human at all. It was a heavily worn fourth molar from the jaws of an extinct species of peccary. And so, it all came crashing down. There was no Hesperopithecus haroldcooki. All the searching, all the claims, all the research had all just turned to dust in a pig's mouth. Sorry, not a pig, in a peccary's mouth. What's the difference? I don't know. I didn't even research that for this video because I don't even care. Milo, isn't it your job to research these videos? Couldn't you have told what the difference is between a pig and a peccary? Yeah, I could, but you know what? I have my pride to look out for. I wouldn't be caught dead researching a peccary. So, you may be wondering, no, I'm out of thumbtacks, and this is my last piece of paper, and this. Did you hear that? That weird little noise right there? Yeah, that was the sound of my lav mic receiver just sort of shutting off. So the reason why there's nothing on the wall anymore here is because I finished filming this video yesterday and had about 45 minutes of footage where there's no audio. And so, I get to reshoot it all today. You know, I think this title card is actually even more appropriate given the situation now. How did this even happen? I don't even have alcohol anymore. I'm gonna just use this tub of ice. Fuck. Most of the topics that I discuss in my content, both in and outside of awful archaeology, can broadly be classed as pseudoscience. Erroneous interpretations of fragmentary evidence by groups such as young Earth creationists and ancient aliens theorists. But this is one of those stories where the call was coming from inside the house, because those who are responsible for the misinformation were members of the scientific community. As I mentioned earlier, science is a self-correcting discipline, one that relies on critique after critique to correct errors, and a merciless series of checks and balances in order to prevent errors from being published in the first place. So how exactly was it that a mistake this absurd was even able to happen? It's first important to note the true effect that this discovery had on the field of human evolutionary science, and that is jack shit. Other than that one textbook footnote that we looked at earlier, the following publications debunking this claim did a wonderful job of dispelling it from academia. And this conclusion came as a surprise to pretty much no one within the scientific community, because skeptics of Osborne's claim were pretty justified in their nearly unanimous I told you so. Just one of these was the French paleoanthropologist Marcelin Boule, who commented on this situation by saying, quote, "What bad luck for a fossil called on to play a major role in the history of pre-humanity, but also what a lesson for paleontologists with too vivid an imagination." He even had a brief homage to the Nebraska Man published in his posthumous textbook in the 1950s, saying, quote, "The Nebraska ape man became a pig man. Man bear Nebraska ape bear pig man." An article published in 1928 in the New York Times stated, quote, "Professor Henry Fairfield Osborne and his colleagues can snatch consolation from the extinct jaws of a toothsome wild peccary. For science, as this incident shows, demands proof of even the most exalted. Nothing ever went through so many tests as this peccary molar from Nebraska. It survived them all, but then science went digging in the ancient riverbed again, after which the whole business was on the hog." Believe it or not, that pun probably constituted humor in the 1950s. The 1950s, you just couldn't throw a stone without hitting a hog-based pun. Anybody with an ounce of critical thinking could probably either table this claim until better evidence was found or refute it outright. And even Osborne abandoned the claim in 1925, albeit reluctantly, after the discovery of the peccary tooth. The first reason that something like this was able to happen is a simple case of misidentification. Identification of bones is a shockingly easy mistake to make, and the teeth of peccaries actually look a lot like human teeth. Hilariously, the similarity between hominid teeth and peccary teeth was noted in a paper in as early as 1909. The anterior molars and premolars of this genus of peccaries show a startling resemblance to the teeth of Anthropodia. Might well be mistaken for them by anyone not familiar with the dentation of Miocene peccaries. The person who wrote this quote was W.D. Matthew, who hilariously was a colleague of Osborne at the Museum of Natural History, as well as a colleague of none other than Harold Cook himself. It's wild to think that this whole thing probably could have been avoided if they just happened to strike up conversation with a dude in the office talking about peccary teeth. I guess that's not a super common conversation topic. Use that one next time you're at the water cooler, and I'm sure it'll help you befriend the new intern. So you're the new guy. Well, tell me everything you know about Miocene peccaries. Misidentifications were especially common in the early days of paleontology, where paleontologists were attempting to reconstruct a fractured jigsaw puzzle with no reference image. But even that being said, why were they so hasty to jump to designating one tooth as an entirely new species? Simple. Ego. Osborn was a staunch proponent of evolution, and he found himself locked in constant battle with creationists like William Jennings Bryan. Now, as luck would have it, at the heat of an academic battle between Osborn and Bryan, Osborn would receive the Nebraska Man tooth to his office. So while I don't think that Osborn intentionally fabricated a new species, I have no doubt that his hasty conclusion was drawn at least in part by him trying to mount a vicious defense for Darwinian evolution. Ironically, what we're seeing here is a process that much more closely resembles pseudoscience than the actual scientific process. As we've seen in my breakdown of many pseudoscientific conspiracy theories, many of them start with a conclusion and work backwards. Rather than the scientific method, which aims by posing a question and finding evidence for it, pseudoscience will begin where it wants to end and then find fragmentary evidence in order to support it. And there is no greater piece of evidence that pseudoscience uses than it looks like. A mark on a stone that resembles a star, the direction a doorway faces, or a single water-worn tooth of an extinct pig. Pseudoscience is a problem across the academic world, both within the community and outside of it. But the scientific process works by correcting itself, and it's instances like this that fringe theorists must cling to as they attempt to undermine the discipline by frantically pointing to an instance where someone within it was wrong. In doing research for the Nebraska Man, I came across a surprising amount of publications from creationist sources talking about it, many of whom actually used it as evidence against evolution. But oddly, the Nebraska Man is not evidence of science not working, but rather an evidence of science working exactly as it's supposed to. A mistake was made unintentionally, which happens, but that mistake was caught and swiftly corrected. Even those who were responsible for making this mistake in the first place acknowledged their mistakes when presented with new evidence. And it is this simple distinction that makes a foundational difference between the processes of pseudoscience and actual science. When a pseudoscientist has their beliefs challenged, they will often make excuses or claim that everyone is out to get them. When a scientist is presented with new information, they will weigh this information, and if there is enough of it, they will admit when they were wrong. A common misinformation that we see perpetuated all too frequently is that science is unwilling to challenge the paradigm, which in reality, the only reason we are where we're at today is because science is in a constant process of challenging the paradigm. There are countless examples of scientific studies that have been proven wrong. The original paper claiming that vaccines cause autism, one that conspiracy theorists still desperately cling to today, was disproven hundreds of times over, despite being published by someone who at the time was an actual scientist. And the alpha wolf study that we all know and love has been debunked from everyone from psychologists to wildlife biologists.
Oh, and one that I just thought of after I finished shooting on the flip side is the KPG boundary, the black mat layer that proves that the dinosaurs were likely wiped out by an enormous asteroid impact. The two scientists that first discovered the KPG boundary in the 90s were faced with intense criticism from the scientific community, not because science was unwilling to challenge the paradigm, but simply because this was the first evidence they'd seen of it and they needed more. Rather than bitching and moaning about how no one wants to listen to them, these two scientists did their due diligence and found a litany of evidence proving that an enormous asteroid had impacted the Yucatan Peninsula about 66 million years ago. The Chicxulub impact is now the most widely accepted theory for the event that killed the dinosaurs.
And that is the most important piece of being a scientist. Scientists are able to admit that there is always a chance that they could be wrong. If you follow someone who claims to have all of the answers, someone who claims that they can change an entire discipline with one brushstroke and accuses those within the field of being out to get them, chances are you're following a pseudoscientist, someone who's motivated by ego rather than fact. For anyone who is interested in entering the sciences, please remember this: disagree, question, challenge. It is through these very processes that science grows. We live at a time where science is under fire more than ever by the ego-motivated who wish to try and dispel it, who wish to try and sow the seeds of doubt to make us question it and fear it, people who want us to only listen to them. In the words of one of the greatest scientists of all time, science is a candle in the dark, and it is up to us to carry that torch no matter how dark the darkness may be. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's only one thing left to do, and that is to spin the wheel of pain to figure out what we're talking about next time. Wow, that was a hard-hitting ending right there. All right, here we go, everybody. I feel like I'm staring down the firing squad. Please not something really terrible. God fucking damn it. I was really hoping that Atlantis would be like the last thing that would come up on this wheel. Are you kidding me? That's gonna be such a long fucking video. All right, folks, well, the wheel has spoken. Looks like next time I'm gonna have to talk about Atlantis. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all very much for watching. Make sure to grab one of these limited time pendants. It supports me, it supports a small business, and you get to carry a little of my silver bling with you while doing it. I'd like to thank Newport Foodie for helping me design the drink for this video. Make sure to go check him out on YouTube and on TikTok. And I'd like to thank my patrons for making what I do here possible. Patrons get early ad-free access to all of my videos. And I've actually recently done a Patreon overhaul offering all new reward tiers. As a token of my appreciation, all patrons get their names in the credit of these videos.
Oh, and go check out my second channel for the rest of the drink video and to check out my solo motorcycle cross-country trip.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for watching Awful Archaeology. Remember to stay curious, stay inquisitive, and before next episode, remember to go to the toy store and buy some Play-Doh, because we're going to Atlantis.